Hello and welcome back. In this lecture, our last lecture, congratulations, lecture 18, you made it through. We're breaking down body comp, differentiating fat mass and fat-free mass, visceral fat, brown adipose tissue, and the overall physiology of weight regulation. So if you are into lifespan physiology and long-term wellness themes, this is certainly going to ring a bell for you. As you can see here, we're also going to connect things like aging and sarcopenia, resistance training, and overall long-term health. As usual, our final Bloom's taxonomy style questions, and here we go. This one's kind of a gimme, starting you off easy. Body comp refers to relative amounts of what? Height and weight, fat-free mass, fat mass, bone and muscle, BMI, WHR, that's waist-hip ratio, or adipocytes and BAT. We're going to get to some of those others later on, but this is obviously fat mass and fat-free mass, which is just a simple two-compartment model, and that obviously forms the basis for more advanced body comp analysis when you do things like DEXA scans and the like. BMI is best described as what? Direct measure of body fat, a ratio of fat mass to height, population level screening tool based on height and weight, predictor of aerobic fitness or measure of metabolic health. This one also, hopefully straightforward. It's calculated from height and weight. It is very good for making large-scale population screening easy. It does not measure body fat or distinguish lean mass from adiposity. Hence, a lot of people are technically overweight based on body comp, but it's actually because they have a lot of muscle tissue or they're very tall. Question 3. An individual can be classified as, quote, overfat, even if BMI is normal, because what? BMI underestimates height, BMI does not distinguish fat from lean mass, BMI includes bone density, BMI is age adjusted, or BMI reflects visceral fat only. Kind of gave it away in the previous question there, right? BMI does not differentiate fat mass from lean mass. This is a very important point to drive home. A person may have a normal BMI, but on the opposite, elevated body fat percentage, sometimes referred to as normal weight obesity, which kind of sounds weird, but that's how we classify it. Question 4. Waist-hip ratio, WHR, is clinically important because it reflects what? Total fat mass, subcutaneous fat distribution, lean mass symmetry, visceral fat distribution and cardiometabolic risk, or aerobic capacity. This one's pretty fascinating, but it really does a good job of reflecting your central fat or visceral fat accumulation. Your visceral adiposity, unfortunately, is very strongly associated with increased cardiometabolic risk, so watch out for that. Kind of hard to get that measured. You do it the easy way with the tape measure and estimate your visceral fat, or you can actually get a DEXA scan and measure it. Question 5. BAT, your brown adipose tissue, is unique because of what? It stores triglycerides, it is hormonally inactive, it produces heat through non-shivering thermogenesis, it is present only in infants, or it reduces muscle mass. Brown adipose tissue contains high mitochondrial density, which is really neat, and this uncoupling protein called UCP1, something we didn't go over too much in lecture, which really allows it to generate heat through this non-shivering thermogenesis rather than storing energy. It's a pretty fascinating little piece of tissue in the body. Question 6, the set point theory, another fascinating thing, proposes that body weight is regulated around a biologically defended range, completely environmentally determined, fixed and unchangeable, determined solely by caloric intake, or independent of physical activity. This is a really neat thing. Your set point theory suggests that body weight is regulated around your biologically defended range, meaning it wants to stay in this range of body weight, and is through hormonal and metabolic feedback mechanisms, which means making sustained weight change and weight loss very physiologically challenging. You bring your body weight down to a low level, your body says, no, I have a set point, I actually want to be at here, and that's why a lot of people get that rebound weight gain, and it's really hard to keep it down because of that set point theory. Question 7, approximately what proportion of first week weight loss during dieting is actual fat loss? Is it 60, 70, 40, 25, or 10%? This is your not so fun fact here. Early weight loss during dieting, especially in that first week, largely reflects just glycogen depletion and the associated water loss with that. Only about 25% of initial weight reduction represents true fat loss. Not cool. but that's what happens with the body. Question 8. To most effectively promote weight loss through aerobic exercise, the primary variable to increase is what? Exercise intensity, duration, mode, frequency, or speed. This one's tough because they all could help, but it is absolutely total caloric expenditure being key. So therefore, increasing pure exercise duration typically increases overall energy expenditure much more effectively and easily than simply just cranking up the intensity. They all help, but that's the key. Question 9, which age-related change most directly contributes to declining metabolic resting rate? Not fun, but it also happens to the body. Loss of skeletal mass, reduced pulmonary diffusion, loss of fat mass, reduced VO2 max, or increased adipose size. Well, I wish it was loss of fat mass. No, it's loss of skeletal muscle mass. Skeletal muscle is very metabolically active tissue, and your age-related loss of that, sarcopenia, reduces your resting metabolic rate much more directly than changes in your aerobic capacity to increase it or fat mass when you decrease your fat mass. Question 10. Moderate resistance training in older adults is most strongly associated with improvements in what? Flexibility, bone density, strength, and functional capacity, VO2 max only, reaction time, or body fat distribution. Kind of gave you an easy one to end with. This is the trifecta of bone density, strength, and capacity. Resistance training in older adults is so important and unfortunately often neglected. It improves muscular strength, it improves your bone density, it improves your functional independence and activities of daily living. All of these adaptations directly improve your mobility, they reduce your fall risk, they improve your independence, and they are so important. All right, congratulations on making it through the class. Good luck in the final.